Today is a good day to review the remake of Flatliners. Flatliners is back for 2017's horror films. Yesterday I reviewed the original film, and today is the 2017 movie. Before I really get into anything, I will say that in general, from a logical standpoint, the 2017 movie is superior. I know that a lot of people have rated this lower than the original, but I'm not entirely sure that's a fair assessment, because a lot of what happens in the original movie doesn't really match up to any logical standpoint. The movie centers on a bunch of med students as they conduct an experiment to find out what happens after death. That means they have to stop their own hearts to find out the answers. To further their assessment, they use modern technology and medical advances to report what's actually happening in their brain while they are dead for however minutes they choose to be dead. They have a machine that scans the brain, which is far superior than the original, in which somebody stood to the side and filmed it with a video camera, which of course the results always come back the same. Somebody dies and then they come back. You can't really prove they saw anything, but with the brain mapping and seeing the electrical activity going on in the brain while they're dead does make sense from a logical standpoint, like I said, which is what I actually prefer when it comes down to the two films. That specifically comes down to a foundation for the rest of the movie, which I'll get to in a minute. The people category. Acting wise, it's a horror film that really doesn't rely too much on good acting. 1 out of 2 possible stars. The characters, again, like the original film, very similar. They try to have diverse characters, and they are kind of diverse, but in the end, the characters are more important to the overall story than they are memorable. That only gets 1 out of 2 possible stars. Casting wise, I honestly think the first was better with casting. You might not remember who was cast in the first film for the most part, but it is a wide range of memorable actors all around. This one had Ellen Page. But most of the actors here are fine, and even so, I don't think they were perfect for the roles either. They could have cast anybody but Ellen Page as well, so as far as that goes, 1 out of 2 possible stars. Importance, like I was mentioning before, the characters themselves aren't super diverse and memorable, but they do play an important part in the role. Each med student has their own expertise and own knowledge in certain fields, so as far as importance goes, 2 out of 2 possible stars. Chemistry, there's not a whole lot of chemistry. I feel like there is more chemistry in this than the original film because some strong focus on the idea behind adrenaline junkies, and after 2 people have gone through the dying and coming back process, they're on the same wavelength as far as adrenaline goes. That's kind of like chemistry, but it's not a huge focus. 1 out of 2 possible stars. Rating. As far as dialogue goes, nothing was spectacular or memorable. It wasn't cheesy like the original film, but it also wasn't memorable. Nothing really grabs your attention as far as the dialogue is concerned. Dialogue gets 1 out of 2 possible stars. Balance, very much like the original film. There's no balance at all. There's no real plot direction. Each character has their own history, their own story, their own reason to want to die, to come back, to see what's on the other side. That's it. The plot is let me go next. Let me go next. I'm gonna go next. I'm gonna stay in there longer. There's no real plot direction there. That gets 0. The story itself, the original did this better. This movie focused more on horror and their past demons and coming to haunt them and everything. They focused more on that. So I can't say it's super deep or meaningful. 1 out of 2 possible stars. Originality, I will say it's original. It took one story that worked in 1990 and expanded upon it in order for it to feel more logical and modern for us in 2017. It also went above and beyond to make those cheesy, corny horror scenes that were in the first one feel more threatening. 2 out of 2 possible stars. How interesting was it? Very interesting. I wanted to see it as soon as I heard they were remaking the Flatliners movie from 1990, and I saw it as soon as possible. 2 thumbs up from Dave. 2 out of 2 possible stars. BTS. Behind the scenes. The visuals were much better this time around when it comes down to floating and flying through the city, and also CGI effects when it comes down to wandering around in the land of the dead. And I think for the most part they did so much better here than they did in the original film. 2 out of 2 possible stars. Directing, this mostly has to do with what I was talking about before, the camera work and floating and flying and getting all the specifically good looking scenes. Kudos for the director there, as well as once again expanding upon these characters' lives and why they need to die and why this is important for them, because that differs for everybody. 2 out of 2 possible stars for directing. Editing, just like the original, nothing really fancy here, nothing really sticks out. Typical average editing job. 1 out of 2 possible stars. Advertisement, I consider it as advertised, nothing feels false to me here. 2 out of 2 possible stars. Music, nothing really stands out. I didn't really hear anything in the film that made me want to hear a soundtrack or score. No sound specifically that really impressed me other than the very beginning. It played to the strengths of surround sound with voices coming from all directions behind you. That was nice, but for the rest of the movie it really felt typical. 1 out of 2 possible stars. Narrative arc score. Introduction, of course, we get introduced to a bunch of characters and basically how they live their lives before we get into the nitty-gritty. 2 out of 2 possible stars there. The inciting incident is when Ellen Page first goes under and dies. 2 out of 2 possible stars. The obstacles, of course, every single person who wants to go under, wants to die, wants to experience things, but then because they do that, bad things start happening in the real world and they have to deal with that and they have to figure out why that's happening and how to stop that. 2 out of 2 possible stars. The climax is the culmination of everything, basically when they figure out how to deal with those obstacles and ultimately what everything means as a whole. 2 out of 2 possible stars. The falling action mostly just calms down slowly, but doesn't really come back to a new sense of norm that's really any different than the beginning. So as far as that goes, 1 out of 2 possible stars. Entertainment score. Rewatchability. Yes, I consider this more rewatchable than the original film, which I watched, 20 years after I saw it for the first time? This one, however, I feel like I would go looking for it to watch it again because it was interesting to me and I did have a good time watching it. So rewatchability gets 2 out of 2 possible stars. Fun? Yes and no. It's the same problem the first film has. You have a lot of fun watching when these people die and what they experience after the fact, but nothing really sucks you in other than that. So as far as fun and sucking you in, 1 out of 2 possible stars for both. Do I have an impulse to buy it? No, I don't think I'd buy it. I don't really think I'd own it either. 0. Do I have an impulse to talk about it? Yes, because I want to compare the 2 movies specifically. It's not a movie that I would run to somebody, say, you gotta see this movie, because it's not one of those type of films, but I wouldn't mind having a discussion about it under the confines of comparing the original and this film and seeing why this film, in my opinion, is superior, but only by a small margin. They're very, very close. 1 out of 2 possible stars. Specialty. Alright, so this is a remake, a horror film, science fiction film. I want to know how Ellen Page is in it, and if it's halfway decent. As a remake, what I mean by that is, did it need to be done? And for that I answer yes, because in 1990 they didn't have the benefits they do now in order to tell a good film, good story for film. In 1990 they had technical aspects both in filmmaking and in what they're trying to tell. So scientific and medical technology just didn't exist back then, and so they did have to rely on a video camera, which didn't make a whole lot of sense. So that part says yes. The second part of that is, did they add anything to it, or did it just feel like the same film? I think it felt like the same film enough, but added to where the first film failed. 10 out of 10 possible stars. As a horror, I also have to give this 10 out of 10 possible stars. While I don't really consider it scary, I do consider it a horror film. It feels like a horror film, unlike the first film. So as far as that goes, 10 out of 10 possible stars. Onto the sci-fi. When I think of sci-fi, I expect a scientifically detailed explanation of how they're doing things in the film. And in this case, it is completely there. They list off how they're doing it and why, and they show you graphical evidence that this is science fiction for sure. 10 out of 10 possible stars. Ellen Page, while I think she did a good job in it, I've seen her in other things. To be honest, I haven't seen her in a million things, but I have seen her in quite a few things. Somebody brought up Ellen Page as an actress. I don't think I'd bring up Flatliners at all. It's not her best performance. It's probably not her worst. So as far as that goes, I'm unfortunately going to have to give her 0. Finally, halfway decent? Of course it is. And the last one was halfway decent. This one told the story that the director wanted to tell. It was the movie that they wanted to come out. Good or bad, that's always a positive thing, and you have to give it credit where credit is due. 10 out of 10 possible stars there. If we add all that up, we get 74 out of 100 possible stars. 74%. The first one I think I rated 71%, and this one's 74. Like I said, it's superior, but by a very small margin, like 3%. It's not a huge difference, but it is the film that I prefer between the two of them. Guys, tell me what you thought of the remake of Flatliners in the comments below. And as always, follow me on Twitter and Trek.tv at username IAMDWG. That's IMDWG. For YouTube, subscribe to me, hit that like button, and hit that bell to be notified when I come out with my next review, which will be 2010's Skyline, as I prepare to review for the sequel, Beyond Skyline, on Friday. So look out for those, guys. Peace out.